I think, I've been hearing today over and over again the need for a marketing mindset when it comes to recruiting. And so clearly, the people here in social recruiting are from marketing backgrounds, human resources. I guess, that'll be given. Maybe you were in-house recruiters before. Consulting, this whole consulting mentality that's needed in the recruitment space as well. And a bit of fun, what were your most unusual previous job titles? So we've got somewhere in social recruiting an ex-captain in the army, a museum assistant, a graphic designer, and I was talking to the insights team and said, what does that tell us? I think what that does tell us is that potentially next time you're visiting the British Museum and you're talking to a museum assistant, that could potentially be your next recruiter. It's to kind of keep a very broad mind about where potentially your next hire might come from. The other thing that we can look at is migration trends. So let's have a quick look at those migration trends. At LinkedIn, you will have heard Dan Dackham talk about the economic graph. And so we have a unique view into how our 300 million plus professionals are moving around the world to pursue career opportunities. And this mobility of professional talent indicates to us the health of the economy, and that's our vision to create an economic graph. So we're seeking to better understand and map the dynamics of economic indicators and to get a big picture of talent mobility around the world. And so we analyze our data to see the countries that gained and lost the most from staffing talent. The UK is a hub of movement. So the European country with the largest movement, both so inflow of people joining staffing firms and outflow, was the UK, above and beyond every other country. But which countries were gaining the highest number of staffing people? The way that we worked this out, we looked at people coming in, leaving, and then divide that by the kind of population of that country. And you can see Luxembourg, Switzerland, Sweden had the highest net inflow of people joining in terms of staffing. And the countries with the highest net outflow, Spain, Portugal, and France. So you can see potentially there's some great talent who, staffing talent who is looking to potentially move out of these countries and take those conclusions as you will. And Europe really is at the heart of talent migration in the staffing industry. When we look at everyone in the staffing industry who has moved across the world, we can see that 19% of the movers stayed within Europe. They moved from one country to another within Europe. 14% moved into Europe, 20% moved outside of Europe, and the rest of the 47% moved within other regions around the world. The fact that there is freedom of movement around Europe means that you get a real diversity of recruitment talent. And again, for your recruitment firms, whether you're big or small, how can you take advantage of that? How can you get those expertise, those language skills, those different perspectives? I just want to get a show of hands first off, just so that I can gauge the room, because we want to make this session as relevant as possible. So how many of you here are of firms from 1 to 15 employees? Okay, a handful. 16 to 100. Okay, a bit more. 101 to 500. Okay, and 500 plus. Okay, real mix. So what we're going to do is, to carry on the conversation, I'm going to have John and Lindsay join us. I'm going to pose them some questions. We're going to do a bit of Q&A, panel discussion, but I'm going to leave a big amount of time for questions, whether it's about those trends that you've seen or posing questions to John and Lindsay. But really, we want to kind of derive from these guys who spend their time day in, day out recruiting and growing their businesses from an internal hiring perspective, to see how they can help you in growing your own recruitment firms. So, Lindsay, I guess first off, we think about kind of these trends that you've seen, and you want to get more people within your firm, and the first place to start is to kind of figure out what you are to a potential employer, the employer value proposition. What does employer value proposition mean to you and to LinkedIn?
Yeah, so for the first kind of 2 years when I joined LinkedIn, it didn't mean anything, because our objective was to come in and fill hundreds of recs. So when I joined, it was 50 employees. As of yesterday, we're now 921. It started off as just myself. Now opening a team of 30 with 7 open heads on top of that. So, for the first kind of year and a half, it was pretty chaotic. We were building our leadership team, so EVP was a distant memory. Up until about 18 months ago, when, as a leadership team, we decided that, what we want to do is to obviously elevate the career of anyone in talent acquisition. So as a global team, we focused on defining exactly what our vision is. And our vision is to design, build, and share best on planet recruiting. And essentially that ties into a mission, which is that we are LinkedIn, powering LinkedIn to revolutionize the hiring experience. And then from that, we've built a talent advisor model. So for us, really, we found our bar, we found our niche, we found what we wanted to do and the team that we wanted around us to help LinkedIn scale. And we've really stuck to that partner model. So that's been our journey, which is now pretty stable in terms of our EVP. Okay,
so when you say you're within your team, you're trying to create a talent advisor model, what does that mean to you and LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I think working at LinkedIn, really to work for the company that's changed our industry and changed our job is pretty incredible. But it also brings a very high pressure to be the best at what we do. The talent advisor model for us is a true consultant. So it's not someone who is an order taker. It's pretty much someone who can partner with our business, like understand our business inside out, be able to manage expectations, be able to push back and say no, which is okay. But to really elevate up our profile of hire and to help us scale. So it's that one-on-one connecting, and at LinkedIn, talent is our #1 operating priority. So it's cool that that's the focus.
Great, okay. And EVP, what does that mean to you and Sodexo?
Where do you want to start? EVP for us, well, in reality, it's what people internally and externally say about you or not say about you if they know you. So if you don't know, Sodexo is massive outsourcing business, so some people will know us and some people won't because we're a white label organisation for NHS departments, prisons, etc., etc. The most important thing is what do we articulate about ourselves and what's the meaning? Is it true? And that's something we're working on at the moment. So we could probably ask 30,000 of our employees and get 6 or 7 different answers depending on which division you work in all honesty. Although when you drill it down, it comes back to basic values and behaviours. And they kind of run through the organisation. So the work we've been doing recently kind of suggests that. We've got to hone that down. But it's then tying that together into one kind of unifying principle and market messages for different, it could be different for different target markets from an employer branding point of view. So we might say something or position it differently in the justice sector than we would in the corporate sector because of the slightly different role profile or skills that we're looking for. But generally it comes down to a unifying mission and a set of behaviours and values and offer that we can make to you as an employee or potential employee. Easier said than done, in all honesty, because I don't think we get it right. Any company gets it right. It's a kind of a holy grail, but it's worth working towards.
Okay, and let's delve a little bit deeper into that thing about brand. We've heard a lot about brand today. Lindsay, you and I are lucky that at LinkedIn, apparently our brand is stronger than Prada's. But Sodexo, I think, is relatable to the recruitment industry because you're white label, and same with the recruitment firms, whether big or small, you're not necessarily a brand in yourself. So how do you go about when you're thinking about finding talent for your own organisation, building a brand?
Well, there's some key messages that we want to get out there so that we would want people to know about. So it's about opportunity or scale. So there's some things that I didn't know before I joined, and people may not necessarily know, that we're the 18th largest company in the world defined by permanent employees. So around the globe, we've got something like 420,000 employees and just under 35,000 in the UK. And that presents a case about opportunity and growth and development. More importantly then, when it comes to recruiting day to day or week to week, it's about understanding our markets. So we've got something like 2,000 sites in the UK where we could have one person cleaning floors in one of those sites to it being a 1,200 people, 1,500 people operation in a prison or hospital or a university. And that's slightly different focus. So really important, we use a lot of data and market understanding to go, how do we target that population or group or geography? Because it could be really important to a cleaning role in West Wales where there's no bus service and the nearest town is 6 miles away. That defines your approach to recruitment to a senior director role in central London. So we've got to look at that data and understand the market conditions by segment, role, profile, and geography, because otherwise we could be there forever. And we're trying to hone that all the time through various sources of data. The data we capture through using LinkedIn, through anecdotal market data from the local manager, because otherwise it's impossible.
Okay. Thank you. And when we looked at some of that data, we saw that there are people from various backgrounds joining the world of recruitment to become recruitment consultants or join staffing firms. And it struck me when I saw that people are coming from consulting firms, from marketing, sales, media and communications, that the perception of working in recruitment is changing. And I know, Lindsay, you previously been in the agency world. How do you capitalize on that change of view of the recruitment world in when you're scaling your own team and trying to get recruiters to come and work for LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think that anyone's career in recruiting, the ability to see it as credible, I don't think is yet there. So I think it's something that's absolutely growing, because what we do, what everybody in this room does, is we essentially shape the future of organizations, right? So talent is any company's best asset. So a couple of things that we've tried to do from that perspective is when we're attracting talent at LinkedIn to the company and from outside the industry, nothing changes when it comes to a compromise on culture. So John just mentioned it. So the first thing we do is hire for LinkedIn. There's no compromise on that. So it doesn't matter what team you're going into, because there's a culture, there's a value, and there's also an environment. So being pretty honest about the environment that we work in is key. Then for us, really, to attract into the TA team, it's about them understanding our profile of hire, what's needed to be successful. It's about sharing our transformation plan. But my best advice is just be honest. And we have to become more open-minded to attracting talent from outside the industry as we seek to scale.
And picking up on that idea of culture, to give you an insight, when I was hired at LinkedIn, I got this email and said, come in for a coffee, and the first interview was just talking about culture. I left the building thinking, what do they actually, what's the job? And even the second, we talked about culture, the second interview quite a lot. So this whole idea of culture. Yeah, can you expand on that and how important it is? You say even within your recruitment team, you hire for LinkedIn first in terms of a culture perspective. How do you do it? And then how can the people sitting in this room start to communicate their culture out to potential recruits and new consultants?
Well, first of all, you've got to be clear on what that means and what it is. So for For us at LinkedIn, from a culture perspective, it's transformation, it's collaboration, it's integrity, and it's humor, and it's results. But it's also about the environment. So something that we're fairly honest with is you are not going to come into somewhere that is structured. We are not process-driven, we're not policy-orientated, we're not as big as you think, and we're not as far ahead as you think. But that's amazing, right? Because you can come in and get to build, it's challenging, no day is the same, and it's either for you or it's not. So I think the most important thing for us is you've got to be able to rule that out at the start, because the opportunity to attract and retain is all down to culture. So I think honesty is the best policy, is really the best way to say it. That's how you set people up for success.
And John, yeah, when you're looking to expand your recruitment team, again, how do you go about it at Sodexo?
I mean, for me, it's all about behaviours. So we've just promoted 2 junior people who are admin assistants, effectively, into recruiting roles, and it was all about. So they knew a bit about Sodexo, which is good, because there's some particular stuff to us. But so they obviously fit in. So back to the culture piece, but. It's about, do they demonstrate curiosity? Will they be, I hate the word self-starter, but independent and willing, not necessarily able yet, but to take decisions on their own and be willing to make mistakes and admit mistakes. Because if you don't make mistakes, you won't progress. But sensible risk and that hunger to learn. And I wouldn't be arrogant enough to suggest we can tell you what to do. It's your business and your particular niche, sector, culture, etc. But I think that's what defines, especially recruitment and sales, is that curiosity and behaviour to keep going and keep going under pressure. And it's not very different in-house. There's a sales focus to you guys, and there's a thing to us that we never escape the customer, because they're always on your back and they're always next door to you or shouting down the phone. So you guys can often choose the recs you work on. We can't, and the customer never goes away. So that's the only difference in a sense. So you still need the same resilience and bounce back, and that's what you look for.
Great. Okay. And then just thinking about the industry as a whole, just going back a little bit and talking about the industry as a whole, and that shifting perception of recruitment. So I guess when you're selling a role in recruitment, we're not only selling the job, but potentially selling the company and then selling the industry if they're coming outside of the industry. So let's say I'm someone who's working for a consulting firm. I'm thinking about joining a recruitment firm or a recruitment team. How do you go about communicating the industry to potential candidates, both in that one-to-one interviewing, but also on social media? How do you get that across?
So I'll take the kind of one-to-one approach. So personally, I'm a hiring manager myself, so I prefer to hunt. I pretty much know my profile of hire. So when it comes to a one-to-one setting, ultimately I want to hook you. So very soft in-mail. I pretty much tend to pipeline quite a lot, tend to seek feedback as to who the great recruiters are in the industry, whether it's corporate or agency. And for me, again, when I get on the phone, it's back to the culture, but it's master storytelling. So what we focus on at LinkedIn is training the entire business, whether you're a hiring manager, interviewer, or recruiter. We teach them how to tell a story. So it comes back to recruiters being marketeers. And pretty much in that story, I'm really painting a picture of what it's like to work in the TA team in a very honest way. We are on a journey. We've by no means nailed it. We have a vision and a mission, but we also have a talent advisor model, which we've pretty much nailed and embedded in terms of the competencies and the behaviors. So it's pretty much this may work, this may not work, and it's just a conversation. And that's really how I start the one-to-one process. When it comes to the one-to-many, we use LinkedIn, so be able to make sure our career pages send the right message, be able to make sure our own profiles are cool. Our own profiles need to say the right message. But actually, every single employee that works for us has a profile that recruits. So we do a lot of work at induction around you having a great profile, making sure that it's a profile that recruits, but actually it's your identity and it's your brand that's been building. Things like the follower ecosystem, leveraging media, all the wonderful LinkedIn tools that are out there.
Okay. And John, how do you attract people who potentially, from outside?
For me, I mean, we're in a very fortunate position as recruiters and ultimately external recruiters, because you've got a view internally of a broader view of the business than probably any other either HR business partner or director of the business, because we're looking across the whole business, right? And we can spot trends, behaviours, things, shifts that we know are happening before the business sees, whether it's in talent or process or market, geographic shifts or whatever outside the business. And that gives us power if the recruiter is able enough to articulate that. So it's about influence. So we can influence all sorts of things if we can fight for the place at the table. That's what I would say. And sometimes we're good at it and sometimes we're not, right? So it is a constant learning. What I'd say to a recruiter is exactly that. They've got the opportunity isn't confined, because there's always more stuff we can be doing that's better. We never get it exactly right. And equally, I'd say from an external point of view, what we look for when we partner with agencies or headhunters or whatever, when we need to, is that insight, right? So if you're a niche player or you really understand your particular market segment, candidate pool, whatever it is, that's powerful, right? And really powerful. And the better you are at that, the more successful the relationship will be with us, and the more successful you'll be.
Okay. And thinking about people coming outside of the industry, it might be someone who's just actually fresh out of university. I know, Lindsay, we spoke earlier about potentially getting people in from straight from university and developing their graduates. I guess the challenge for a recruitment agency might be that you want to get someone coming in and getting fees pretty much immediately, and it's a big, I guess, both time and money commitment to grow your own recruitment team from grad. So how do you manage that? How do you balance that?
Yeah, well, it's not easy, but what we decided to do was we've made a decision to build a sourcing model, and we've opened up flexibility around our profile of hire. So the sourcing team at the moment is pretty much a junior team, so we want to give opportunity to grow our own. And in terms of diversity of profile of hire, we've actually recruited more so people coming from a data insights background, sales operations background, but also then being open to someone who's just completed their HR degree. I think it's very important to have the balance of grow your own and hiring experts as well. But the way we do it is, from a time perspective, is those that are high-performing senior recruiters on the team have put their hand up for more opportunity to mentor, to coach, to get a flavor of what it could be like to be a team lead. So essentially, the sourcers are aligned to the recruiter. It's at the moment a one-to-one relationship across most of the team in Ireland, supporting Ireland. And that's essentially what we've done. We have 3 people on the team who've never worked in recruiting. 2 have just been promoted, and 1 is on his path to be promoted next year. So I think it's up to you. If you've got the time and capacity to do so, it's definitely worth a shot.
Okay. Well, what about yourself?
I don't think it's any different to any other line of business, right? The biggest problem in industry right now is that talent management, I'd call it, so from cradle to grave. So developing people and making the best use of your own talent, whether that's emerging talent in the graduate market or someone you hire and then you develop on, and that's incumbent upon all leaders. So I see that as my job, is to develop my current team and the juniors that are coming through, and that's got to be a focus, because otherwise you can't grow the business. Now that's not particular to recruitment. I think that's it's a catch-22 question, in that do you go from being a great salesperson to a great leader? Not necessarily, right? And that's something or great operator in a business to a great leader. Not necessarily, and that's the trick, and it's not easy.
Okay, and let's just shift the conversation. So, just as a show of hands, how many people here are looking to recruit for your own organisation outside of your home country at the moment? Okay, so a few of you. Thinking about kind of doing that, going out to a new market. I know Sodexo is globally, LinkedIn, we are expanding all the time. How do you start to resource your teams or the businesses outside of the country? Where's the starting point?
Well, from our perspective, the majority of the recruiting team is based in Dublin, and we support out the 9 markets from there. In the last 14 months, we've started to build our team away from Dublin, so focusing on London. And we've made a decision to move into the Middle East as of early next year. But on the flip side of that, knowledge is just about where are we going, what obstacles to success do we see if we continue building from Ireland out when all these markets are scaling. So it's knowing where the business is going and knowing when to make that right decision for you, the individuals on your team, and ultimately the success of the organization. On the flip side then, the last 3 hires I've made have been relocated to Dublin. So I'm open to different profiles. We focus on language hiring at the moment because we've realigned as a team. And I think it's important to extend your talent pool. So it works both ways, depending on what you want to do.
Okay. And I guess from Sodexo, you know, there's over thousands of locations across the UK. Applying this not necessarily outside of your own country, but outside of your own town. I was talking to a couple of recruiters earlier who were saying they're based in Hertfordshire and it's hard to attract people to Hertfordshire because, you know, it's so easy to commute to London. How do you get people to work in far-reaching places across the UK?
I don't know. No, realistically, it's back to that data and insight, and it's kind of knowing the profile of the person you want to hire. So I think we go back to in a previous life as well, in my previous organisation, it was like, well, do we want these high flyers? You know, will someone okay for the role suffice? Well, maybe, right? Because do you have to have a high flyer for everything? Do they need certain behaviours and certain attitudes? Yes, but if someone needs a job locally and will be loyal and do the things you need them to do to make your business successful, and you know what that candidate market is like, or the demographic, or the economic indicators, then you can probably attract them. But it's being realistic. So for us, it's the discussion with the hiring manager locally, getting insight from our own team and other sources, but understanding that and then playing that back. So, you know, is it always they've got to have, because often a manager or anybody will recruit in their own image and not look at a diversity of source. So, you know, can you do it part-time? Can you do someone that can do flexible hours? Well, maybe, you know, so it's opening the mindset to something a little bit different that might actually work, especially with technology. You know, I have recruiters that some work in London, some in Manchester, some from home, some remotely, and I'm comfortable with that, and that's kind of my decision, and it works. Others, it might not work for other people. So,
okay. And you know, thinking about workforce planning, you know, thinking about when you need to, maybe recruitment firms here are thinking of expanding out. How does the world in the corporate world? How do you think about workforce planning and thinking about your future requirements for for the businesses?
That's a big question. Currently, we don't get it. We're not very good at it right now. But we know we're starting to work on it. It's as simple or as hard as you make it. And there's a kind of there's a couple of key things you need to take into account. One is there's a natural turnover rate. Okay, so it's always a surprise to a manager in our organisation that we recruit. You know, an account manager is a typical profile in our operations, and we recruit about 70 or 80 a year across the different sections, and there's about 10% turnover. So if we did nothing else next year, we would lose 10 staff through natural turnover, leaving, competition, maternity leave. It's always a shock when we win a contract and need someone. So there's a bit about that upfront planning and understanding that, and just shine. And recruiters' job, I think, is to shine a light on it. It's really naive to think, because everyone says HR VPs do it. They don't. Right? Generally, some do. Some organisations do, but recruitment can take a hold of that and shine a light on that. And as a sales business, you know there's going to be some turnover, right? And you'll want the turnover. You know, you want the low performers to go. So there's a kind of a thing, knowing that you're growing and there's some turnover, there's worth planning and profiling for that. You know, when we did, in my last organisation, we did a lot of that around the sales force, and that was about behavioural hiring and knowing that we just need a pipeline, constant pipeline of contact with the right profile. It started to work. It wasn't perfect, but it's better than waiting 3-6 months to hire, you know, and to fill a desk if it's, you know, a hot desk.
Yeah, and I guess for recruitment firms here, potential, you know, having that vacancy in the recruitment cost, team, it's opportunity cost. Yeah. Lindsay, what do we do in terms of?
Also, not that great. So we're literally just on our journey when it comes to workforce planning. Ahead of the curve this year, but very similar to John, the recruiters who are partners to clients or to your business really know everything. They know potential risk, they know potential movement. They obviously understand what the talent market is like. They know what profile of hire is out there. The way that we work it at the moment is my relationship would be with the financial planning and analysis team, sales operations, the business partners, HR BPs. But we've been playing catch up. Like, we've seriously been playing catch up. And 2 weeks ago, we got extra 84 headcount, right? That have to be offer accept by December. And that left me with a gap in my team. So I've got 5 open heads. Luckily, I had a pipeline, so we had 2 offer accepts, but I still have to take on the task of hiring 3 more recruiters to fill all your roles.
Okay, well, so that pipelining is really important to the kind of health of the business, especially when you're scaling out. And thinking about that scaling out, so how do you when you're thinking about some of the firms here might be scaling big, and that might be relative. If it's a 10-person firm, it might be going to 20. If it's 1,000, it might be going to 1,500. How do you hire to scale, and what are the fundamentals to get in place when you're hiring to scale? Yeah,
so from our perspective, we're not slowing down. I don't think we're going to expect to slow down in our organization. So we've had to reorg. So for the last couple of years, the team has been a business-aligned team, which has created silos. It's created indiscrepancies with hiring relationships. It just hasn't been viable as we've just continued to grow and grow. So we're now a country-aligned recruiting team, focused on predominantly hiring languages into the team, starting to scale the team out into certain locations. And how I've really been able to get ahead of that is by simply just partnering with our business. Feeling quite good, feeling like we're in a really good place, got a really good positive head start to 2015 planning, but I wouldn't know it if I didn't have a client partnership, essentially, and it's not too dissimilar for anybody in this room. You've got to know your client.
Yeah. And John, when you talk about hiring to scale, I hear Sodexo's got 35,000 employees in the UK. So give us some insights.
Well, it splits into categories, but there's the volume roles that are the frontline roles, which is a constant kind of turnover. So that's more about behavioural kind of indicators, which those roles don't tend to be difficult to hire for want of applications. It's more about, are they the right type? So we've got to find tools to filter people out rather than in. For the critical business roles, that's probably more the stuff that Lindsay's talking about. So we've just started that process in certain pockets where we know we have turnover and growth. And that's it's back to this knowing your customer. It sounds really simple, but not. But getting close and challenging the assumption that every hire is different, because they're not, those particular roles. We don't hire many different roles. We just try to hire industrial loads of them. So we hire about 20 different role profiles across the business. Except the one-off technical tax specialists that come around once a couple of years. But the fundamental business is very simple. But it's getting the alignment and agreement of those stakeholders to go, look, we're going to hire to a common set of values and behaviours. There's some skill sets we want to kind of target, but after that, let's pipeline this and make you constantly recruit. That's not always easy, because people don't future focus. They focus on today's task rather than next week or next month. But it's a constant education.
Yeah. Hi. So my question is, when I'm trying to hire people internally, I'm obviously trying to talk to them about the company. In the same way I think you were introduced to LinkedIn, I'm bringing them in and just initially having a sort of informal chat, tell them all about us and what our values are, to see if they would be the right fit, and share those values. And I find sometimes that can have the opposite effect of what I want. It can intimidate them a little bit. So I might spend a lot of time sort of gently building up relationships on LinkedIn, like yourself, sending inbox messages, and when they finally sort of are hooked and want to hear more and want to share personal email addresses. At that point, when I email them about the company and our values and think I'm really building a great picture, I find that that's when the relationship kind of cuts off. I don't know if they're intimidated, or I don't know if you've got any guidelines and at what point really you can stop being subtle and start being bold without scaring somebody.
Yeah, I think it's just about setting expectations. So like that, very similar to you, it's pretty much a casual conversation. It's an exploring conversation. And exploring is us doing the talking and them doing the listening. It's pretty much for me, and it may or may not work, I set the scene at the end of the call. So, I'm going to, it's up to you now. I'd love to discuss things further, but it has to be right for you because it has to be right for LinkedIn. And if this is something you want to engage with, you're pretty much active. You're bought in, you're active. It changes then to an entire different process, which is competency-based interviewing. So I pretty much just put it out there. Happy to do the sell, but I always say, let's go away, think about it. It's completely up to you. I reached out to you at the end of the day. Yeah. But if you want to take this further, then I guess we're active, right?
Okay, thank you.
John, anything to add there?
Nothing to add, no.
And we had another question.
Hi. What I wanted to ask, because the people that I'm approaching, we're a small boutique firm, they're quite desensitized because what they do is obviously what I want them to do, and so they're used to being approached a lot. And so... So
are they other recruiters?
Other recruiters, researchers, sort of from similar industries. Yeah. So I struggle to have that hook because they're getting approached a lot, and sort of through those approaches, everyone's saying something similar. So we've got a really strong brand, really strong values, all the stuff that you were talking about, which is great. But I don't even get to the chance to perhaps say that because you get cut off quite quickly, and they won't even let you get to that point because we're not a big brand ourselves. So people won't necessarily have heard of us. Like LinkedIn, you may get people just Sodexo listening to you because of who you are. I don't have that. So obviously I wondered if you had any pearls of wisdom as to how I can get past that initial, the introduction, and then trying to get the chance to tell them about us.
I don't think there's pearls of wisdom. I think we suffer the same. I don't know about LinkedIn, but certainly the companies I've worked for, Sodexo and then RS Components before, where we are big companies but not known. So if we're trying to recruit outside of sector or specialism that people are going, well, I need a software engineer that everyone wants to work for Google but not RS, right? It's about the message and persistence and maybe thinking a bit differently. So why do you need a recruiter from like for like? Can you take it from a sales background? Can you train it? Can we develop it? Not as easy to implement, but that would be it's that thinking a bit creatively rather than knowing that certain people will be bombarded with messages or and you might not be able to compete with the salary, the package expectations, especially in an inflating market. How do you create that persona that you want to hire? What is it about your good people that you would take and go, well, I might be able to take them from somewhere else?
Yeah. For me, it's about them. So culture and values aside, when it really comes down to it, it's about you reaching out to them because you believe that what you're going to offer is going to transform their career. So a big part of what we do is we're going to master your skills in talent acquisition. And you're going to leave LinkedIn a better professional because there's a very clear profile of hire, there's a very clear performance management structure. And I'm reaching out to you because, number one, I like your profile, and number two, I'm going to elevate you up. So you've got the culture and values piece, right? But then the real hook is them and the skills they're going to bring and what you're going to enhance and the value add to the whole team. So I play more to them, being completely honest. Obviously there's the culture piece, but reality is it's me and you, is it going to work?
It's like dating, isn't it? Let's
yeah, kind of like dating.
Thank you.
Any more questions around the room?
Yeah, hi there. I head up marketing at our company. I'm just curious how the both of you work with, or to what degree you work with your marketing counterparts and leverage each other's expertise to get your employer brand out there.
Good question.
So take it first, or?
We don't have an employer branding team, so it's something that's up and coming next year. So the relationship that we have with marketing is more around advice, it's about our branding when it comes to video job specs, it's around just making sure our communication message is consistent with the culture and values. But I'm being honest, it's a gap for us, right? And it's something that we need. I think we've got to figure out, where does it sit? So does employer branding sit in marketing, or does it sit in talent acquisition? And I think it has to play a role in both. So our relationship, unfortunately, with marketing it's close, but not that close.
Ours is really close with our social media comms team, so digital marketing, really close relationship. So they're really interested in what we're doing with some of the social tools that we use. And we're really interested in kind of the resource they bring to the content, right? So they've got loads of cool content that says about Sodexo every day, the contracts we're winning, the corporate social responsibility stuff that we do, which is really great. So we do work pretty closely, and that's only due to our relationship with them. You know, we just built that. It wasn't designed like that. So it's just about reaching across. You know, in a world where resource is tight, you know, you beg and steal and borrow what you can. So you build relationships. So absolutely, they're key to us because they give us a lot, and hopefully we give them. There's some tools and data that we've got that proves that they're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Any other questions around the room? There's one here and one at the back.
Hi, I've got a similar question to the lady previously. So I've got a similar problem that I recruit recruiters, and it's really difficult to get that hook straight away about them coming back and biting and asking lots of questions, because ultimately you just want to get them on the phone to be able to sell your brand, your product. Would you say that emails are the most effective way to engage with someone straight away, or do you think it depends on the audience that you're targeting?
I think it's how you write the email. So it's not to oversell. It's you know, your objective is to get them on the phone at the end of the day. You know, for us, that's our way, right? So it's in mailing, but we also have you know, the business are always aware when we're hiring recruiters. We look for referrals. You know, we seek to understand who's the great talent out there in the recruiting world. And then it's really about building that pipeline. So for me, yeah, I think in mailing, very softly, or an introduction into someone that's in your network. I mean, what we do is essentially networking, so that's where I've kind of got a lot of contacts as well.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. Our guys will use groups for either for recruiters, but equally for the rest of the business. Groups and soft because you know, LinkedIn is a networking tool, right? And it's a powerful tool. And if you treat it as a network and an extension of give and take, that's where the power is. If you're imparting useful information or content or something that is useful to someone that ultimately might not pay back today, tomorrow, but next month, next year, you might have if you've got something interesting to say, they might say, oh, okay, well, I'll talk to you at some point.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's trying like just very simple video job specs or things like just using rich media content. So putting together a Prezi or a PowerPoint presentation, you get everyone to upload it onto their profile. It's there. I think the summary piece on a LinkedIn profile is hands down the best part of the LinkedIn profile because it's your chance to sell, talk, relate, show who you are. The first thing someone does when they get an email is they go straight to your profile. And if that's where you're going to start your relationship and tell your story, the messaging and the branding has to come strong on that. So the simple little things can tend to work, but I think soft email is fine.
There's a question there at the back.
Hi, it's a question for John. Justin, you mentioned about using tools for hiring for behaviour and attitude and skills, or values, they're not skills. Yep. Can you maybe give some advice or insights on how you do that, what you use?
Well, I mean, the answer is it depends on the role and you know the kind of job that you're hiring for. But in a previous life in RS, we did a lot with Salesforce, and that was around. First, you have to define what it is you look for. You know, what are the key behaviours it came down to ultimately, and then there are a set of tools. So there's some psychometric indicators around verbal reasoning that suggested sales folk are more competent in verbal reasoning that sifted a bunch of people out. And then we devised basically an interview and an assessment process at that second stage, so it didn't elongate the process, that was around an interview that probed those behaviours and a role play that gave you as real life a situation can as a salesperson in that organisation that had very clear positive and negative indicators. So for a hiring manager, it was crystal clear. You know, at every point of the interview assessment process, people got knocked out, and it was quite clear by the time they got to the final stage that there were 2 or 3 there. Two could probably get offered the job generally, but it was you have to define what good looks like, and then look at those. But there are psychometric tools that you can use, but it's just a bit of advice around. And I can go into specifics if you want to chat afterwards, but you know, it's a bit of a process, but it's worth it.
Just to add to that, we've built it's called a career performance profile for the recruiters. So it's essentially 6 areas. So it's attracting, sourcing, interview and assessment, operational excellence, negotiating and closing, and business partnering. And across the levels in the team, you've got 3 kind of core components, which is you're either developing, proficient, or advanced. And the goal is that 5 out of 6 have to be advanced to move up to that promotional path level. But the how is leadership, leverage, results, and culture at LinkedIn. So that's really how we drive the behaviors and the accomplishments of growing your competency base. You know, we've had feedback for quite some time that we need to understand how our performance is managed. You know, we need to understand what great looks like in TA. We need to understand the next level. So we spent some time really bedding that down. And the 6 kind of core skills I've called out, I don't think are too dissimilar to whether you're staffing, corporate, doesn't matter, right? We have to use those components every day.
Yeah, I guess that's really interesting because, yeah, that way, I guess every kind of consultant that's working for your business has got a career path. They can see that they're going to be developed, and there's a clear path to progression. Does that answer your question? Yep. Any other questions to John and Lindsay? I just wanted to ask. I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into kind of the messaging that you give when you're thinking about the kind of one-to-many aspect of promoting a job in recruitment or within your team. So this is thinking specifically about hiring people for your recruitment team. You know, how do you get that relevant messaging right? What do you use? Do you use obviously? Will you use LinkedIn? Do you use Twitter? Yeah. How do you get kind of people excited? Because, you know, with I think the thing that we've learned today is that you've got you know, a stage where a candidate won't be aware of your business, and then they become aware, then they become engaged, and that's when they become interested, and you convert them into a hire. But how do you start that awareness piece for people to come and work for your organisation? And to think about like the relevant messaging that you might put out there.
I mean, it goes back to, you know, clearly the recruiting team in Sodexo is small in comparison to the rest of the business, but the same principles apply. We would have, you know, there's something about, you know, our values, our networks, leveraging those networks is absolutely paramount. That's the only way we're going to do it if we're reaching out for recruiters, and it's amplifying that through LinkedIn, but also think about, you know, recruiters. If my recruiters can't find me someone, and I don't know some people, right, I shouldn't be in the game because we're about networking. But then it's having, you know, a consistent message and then distilling that conversation down into, you know, do you fit for us? Do we fit for you? You know, so it's that sales job of converting a candidate into a hot prospect into, you know, a potential hire. But it's no different to what you do.
Yeah, and what about LinkedIn?
We don't really do we don't do a one-to-many approach. Our brand is growing. You know, we've been established now as a talent acquisition team for the past 4 years. We're finding that we're getting more people coming to us. Believe it or not, for the first while, we didn't. There was a perception that it was difficult to work with the TA team. You know, they just use LinkedIn. They're heavy sourcers. It's LinkedIn. It's going to come with this kind of massive pressure. It's not an order-taken environment. So that's been flipping. That's been growing. I think A players attract A players. I think it just comes back to you, your brand, your messaging on your LinkedIn profile, and just have a bit of fun with it, like video specs. I mean, we all know job descriptions are awful. So you've got to do something to bring an opportunity to life.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, so we've heard that, you know, social media is great at kind of showing how quirky you are and all of the fun things go on in your organization. But, you know, when thinking about promoting your brand, you know, I tend to think, you know, you've got to be true to yourself. And so, you know, how do you kind of express that in the messaging there, you know, and how is Sodexo different? I know Lindsay, you know, with LinkedIn, humor is one of the big parts, and we kind of might use that. Sodexo, do you kind of, how do you get the brand image right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's back to that authenticity, right? So there's obviously we have guidelines around brand and messaging because we're, you know, a huge company, so we've got to be cognizant of that. But it is about being authentic and playing to what we believe in. So the company's got a very strong mission and values, grown up over the 40 odd years we've been in existence. But we're not the same as LinkedIn. So you've got to be authentic, honest, and intelligent about how and where you demonstrate that. I mean, it's kind of grandmother teaching you to suck eggs, right? But that's as hard as it is. Sometimes we overcomplicate it as recruiters, definitely, or organisationally we do it.
Great. Anything to add there?
No, I agree. I think it's simplicity. I think you've got to be very aware of the company you're representing. You are a brand ambassador, no matter where you are. So it's about your messaging. It's about being consistent. It is an element of being who you are. It ties into the culture, though, and obviously be careful what you put out on the internet, because obviously the iCloud is doing naughty things. So don't take pictures.
Are there any final questions that you wanted to ask? Oh, we've got another one. Oh, two. Okay.
Yeah, hi, me again. I've got a question for you, Lindsay. The company that I represent, we're lucky enough to have ambitions to grow really quickly, quite a large volume. So echoes of your earlier stories. Looking back where you are now, have you made any mistakes that you don't mind admitting to?
Plenty.
Where you're going through such rapid growth at such a short space of time, and you know, things kind of breaking at the seams maybe a little bit, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at LinkedIn, all the time, right? So it's just a constant environment of seeking to understand and making mistakes and trying to figure out where we're going. We don't plan ahead more than 12 months, and it continuously changes. I think for me, if I think of just as a leader to my team, is there something I regret? It's just about not being ahead of the game when it's coming to my own capacity. So really kind of understanding the people around me, their skills levels, their potential, but then where does that fit into the business in terms of scale? So unfortunately, at times, the business gets a lot of headcount, and then it comes down to, can recruiting staff it? And I just don't think I've been on the ball in terms of, it's like, yeah, no problem, grand, yeah, but haven't really had the right capacity model, which is something we focused on fixing this year by also reorging at another management level and deciding to build a sourcing function. Actually, a sourcing function. Should have done it sooner.
And there's a question just here.
Hello, my name is Ilse. I'm from Yacht, and Yacht is part of the Randstad group. I was just wondering, for the LinkedIn case, yes, I understand that people are nowadays coming to you as a company, but does it mean that you don't do any employer branding, or is marketing do it right now? And my next question is, are you using any other ways of advertising apart from LinkedIn?
So we don't use any other ways of advertising. We use LinkedIn. And to your first question, the only pieces of employer branding we've actually done is just making sure our career profiles and our career pages are consistent with our brand, tying into our culture and values, consistent job postings, you know, being able to tell a story through our jobs. It's really not something we've gone full force with. And that at times has been difficult. So if I take Germany, for example, when we decided to launch there, you know, you've got the competitor Xing, you're building a team from scratch where LinkedIn is not really known. And that's been hard on our side, and it's obviously taken a lot longer to attract talent. So the answer to the first piece is we haven't nailed it. And the second question is just LinkedIn on LinkedIn.
Well, I think we're going to have to stop there. Thank you very much, John and Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.